Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 10DLC webinar. We are excited to have everyone on the event today across the political community. We are joined by hundreds of industry leaders on this call, and we all have something in common here. The 10DLC rules affect all of us. So we're happy to get together each month and discuss the latest developments. And we're also happy to see this 10DLC process continue to evolve based on feedback from the industry. As you may know, Peerly is a national provider of peer-to-peer texting. And although our organization is not political, our software is used heavily throughout the political industry, and we transact billions of messages each year. Peerly, like many of you, have had to navigate the 10DLC process, and we've garnered a lot of knowledge along the way. So webinars like this is a way for us to pass on this knowledge to our community. We have assembled the absolute top industry experts on today's 10DLC call, and they're joining us to provide an update and to answer your questions. We encourage everyone to get involved throughout the event today by asking questions. You can simply type them in below. And I would like to make some quick introductions before handing this off and getting it started. First, let me introduce the VP of Peerly, Dan Aquila. Dan is an expert on 10DLC messaging, and Dan and his team oversaw the implementation of the 10DLC process with hundreds of political accounts here at Peerly. Dan's team's also fully automated this process to benefit his clients and has streamlined the registration through automation. Dan's been heavily involved in high-level international telephony for the past 17 years, and he has close relationships with all the major carriers, DCAs, text aggregators. He's also worked with government regulators in both Canada and the UK, consulting on similar messaging registries designed for both campaigns and service providers. We're also very happy to have Stefan on the call today, the VP of the Campaign Registry, the organization responsible for administering 10DLC registration. Stefan and his team has gone above and beyond throughout the 10DLC rollout process, and they've been amazing to work with. They've been a massive resource for the political industry. And the Campaign Registry continues to bring improvements to the process based on industry recommendations. And Stefan, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with the political industry today and share all the new developments that are unfolding. Also on the line is John from Aegis Mobile. They are the official vetting partner of the Campaign Registry, and they play a massive role behind the scenes when it comes to vetting organizations. Peerly has been thoroughly impressed with how Aegis Mobile leverages technology to make their 10DLC vetting process as seamless as possible. And we're really looking forward to hearing from John today. We also have Amanda Mills, customer success lead from Cineverse on the line. Cineverse is a market leader in A2P messaging, and they've been setting mobile standards and pioneering technology for the past 30 years. Amanda's a wealth of knowledge in telephony and 10DLC, and we're excited to have her on with us today as well. We also have Jonathan from Sinch on the line. He is the director of US messaging products. Sinch, of course, is the leading global communications platform as a service provider, and their cloud messaging platform handles over 145 billion messages a year. John has decades of experience, and we're really happy you're able to join us. Thank you, Jonathan. We also have Stephanie from Bandwidth. Stephanie Lashley is the Senior Director of Product Management of Bandwidth. Bandwidth is a leading provider of SMS and telephony solutions on an enterprise level. Stephanie is one of the top experts in this field, and she brings amazing insight on 10DLC. We're looking forward to hearing from you today as well, Stephanie. Now I would like to hand this over to Dan, just to give us a quick 10DLC overview for some of the audience that may be new to 10DLC. And then we will hear from Stefan from the Campaign Registry and John from Aegis Mobile, where we can have them provide us some updates that we've all been waiting for. Dan, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Josh, and thanks everyone for joining us on this Peerly 10DLC webinar. It's great to see such a huge turnout once again. I want to thank our panelists for joining us as well. We really appreciate it, and I know the political industry does as well. We had so many questions on our last event that we knew we needed to run another. In addition, we have some important new information about how the 10DLC registration process is changing that we wanted to fill you in on. If you have a question, just click the Q&A button down below, get it submitted, and we'll do our best to answer it later on in the call. First, to give you a quick background on what 10DLC is for anyone who's joining and doesn't know, it's an initiative put forward by the mobile phone companies to reduce nuisance text messaging and to stop phishing and fraudulent messages. The industry's response, which was driven mostly by subscriber complaints, was to enact this. However, it is not mandated by the FCC or the FTC or any other government agency or regulatory group. The mobile phone companies believe that with 10DLC, they will be able to weed out the bad actors that cause so many of the complaints they deal with on a daily basis. And it should allow the phone companies to trust that the messages that we send from our verified political campaigns should experience little to no blocking. At the end of the day, it should mean that voters get way fewer spam messages and that our verified messages get much more of their attention. Now, in last month's webinar, we addressed some suggestions from other political vendors that it was in your best interest to hold off from registering or that it wasn't a requirement at the moment. Others claimed that political messaging traffic is being treated unfairly with large restrictions being imposed. However, over the past few months, and especially over the past few weeks since the March 1st deadline, we have seen that that is far from the case. Registered traffic rarely has any deliverability issues, and most clients have few issues getting through the brand registration process. At the end of the day, what matters most is that the messages that you are sending to your voters actually get delivered. And the best and easiest way to ensure this is to be registered. Now, during our last call, we had a lot of questions around the campaign verify process, what was involved, why it was needed, and some common issues that political campaigns were running into. For months, we've been passing your concerns on, and today we're happy to announce that soon there will be an updated process for political campaigns and PACs to get verified. It will be streamlined, faster, and much easier. We will get into the details a little later on with Stefan and John, but in a few short weeks from now, the whole process should be built right into the Purely platform without having to sign up for Campaign Verify directly. Another topic that we had many questions on last month was MMS and 10DLC. We know that many in the political industry are switching over to MMS for a variety of reasons, one of which is our currently in beta video MMS. So we wanted to let you hear directly from our panelists on the call about the upcoming MMS capacity changes and 10DLC support for MMS. Now, I want to get to what we've been waiting for. You've been hearing some rumors about big changes in the political campaign verification process that the Campaign Registry and Aegis Mobile have been working on. We at Purely are really excited about these changes. Stefan, John, we know that you and your organizations have been working extremely hard on this for the past few months, so I wanted to pass the call over to both of you so you can explain how these changes are going to affect political campaign vetting. Stefan, can you take us through some of the changes that are being implemented soon?
Oh, no problem at all. So one of the things that we have in the campaign registry is that within our general vetting that we do when people are looking for better throughput, then they have choices. They have a choice of currently 2 approved vetting partners. And Aegis is one of those partners. Within the political vetting, there was a singular choice with Campaign Verify. And so what we have been doing is working with the carriers to actually bring to the market a second option. And this option is utilizing the processes that Aegis already do for verification within TCR and applying it to the political space. The process is not going to be any different to what people are experiencing with Campaign Verify today. There will be a need to enter the data that you have entered for your election campaign, state, local, or federal. And then obviously there is a verification process included in that for the brand that is actually submitting themselves for that process, and then a check against what has been registered. And then obviously a code being sent to an email address or snail mail address dependent on which has been again registered. And John Tulike from Aegis can go into some of the details around that. And then there is, from there, a verification token issued, and that token then applies in the same way that it does. Campaign Verify tokens will continue to be accepted and applied, and it's basically people have a choice of which way they want to go. And we will be, although this will be an integrated process within TCR, it will be fully API driven, as well as obviously having people the ability to go in via their portals and also apply for that particular vetting. We're also working with Campaign Verify to pull them into the API flow as well. So there's not going to be any real distinction between the two. It's just really which you would prefer to use. And I'd like to hand over to John Tulike. John, I think one of the things that maybe to cover off is some of the, I wouldn't say restrictions. Well, yes, there are restrictions. Some of the things that we've been talking about, you know, the email addresses that really can be applied to this and which ones really cannot. So it's important to understand that when people are setting up and registering their election campaigns for state, local, or federal, and also then the options for next day delivery, which I think is one thing that we're obviously bringing into this.
Yes.
So, John?
Thank you, Stefan. Yes, very good points. And you will be able to do a one-step process in inputting all of your data at one time, and then TCR routes it through the whole process. So you don't have to go separately to Aegis to enter the political verification process. But Stefan brings up a very good point. Obviously, for political messaging security is a huge concern, especially with regard to the potential for intrusion by foreign entities, and just anything that involves electoral integrity is a very sensitive topic. So one of the steps in the verification process, after we've gone through and checked that everything you entered matches up properly to how you're politically registered with your electoral authority, then we issue a PIN for you to verify. And you have a choice. You can select what is your preferred method of delivery. If you were to select email, there's a lot of sensitivity around that. The carriers are concerned about email. So there are going to be, as Steph mentioned, some restrictions in terms of when we is that the email address that you enter has to exactly match the email address that's registered with your electoral authority. The other thing is that we don't want to see any Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail accounts. It actually has to be of a domain that belongs to your organization, that we're physical path. Complaints about receiving your information through the USPS first class delivery. Had letters take 3 weeks to 6 months to get across town. So we've all completely. And for that reason, we are also including the ability for you to opt into an express delivery process through Federal Express. Now, obviously, that is a more costly delivery method. So if we're going to have to charge the incremental cost to send it by FedEx, we're not put on that. We're simply, it's the extra cost that we have to bear to get it to you. In order to be eligible for FedEx delivery, you cannot have registered a PO box. FedEx will not deliver. You don't have a good email address that meets all those requirements, and your address is a PO box, I'm sorry, we're going to have to send it by first class mail, but it will be sent to you. Once you receive that PIN, 2 methods. You'll see on the email that exactly why you're getting the letter on the email or letter, exactly why you're getting it. It's going to mention that you tried to register for political through TCR and through Aegis verification. It will give you a PIN and both a URL and a QR code, depending upon what you're most comfortable with. That will get you into the site where you enter your PIN, and you're also going to have to enter your brand ID. And that's something that's not printed on the letter. It'll tell you that you need to enter it, but that's what you get from your TCR registration. That gives us an extra level of security so that somebody can't just get the letter and register and complete the PIN verification. It has to be something that only you are going to know. So once you have completed that process, then the token, the verification will be complete. The token will be automatically sent to TCR, and you will be qualified for political messaging. The other thing that we always anticipate, is that you may not remember exactly everything the way you registered with your electoral authority. I mean, it's sometimes easy to look up, but we also understand that some of the down ballot registration processes, depending on your state and locality, may be a little bit more opaque. And so if we run into issues where what you submitted to us doesn't exactly match what we find in the electoral authority, there's always going to be a process for you to appeal. If it's a significant difference, you may get a failure of the verification. You'll get notified, but there is always an appeal process available to you, where we'll work with you to make sure that we can get everything straightened out and get you verified as quickly as possible.
JT, one thing I was going to ask you was, and I know I'm going to ask you how long is a piece of string. I know that, but when we're looking at a typical kind of time frame, given if people are entering the data correctly and there are no appeals necessary, what do you think? If federal, I understand, would probably be a faster response than local and state, but what would that difference be, do you think? I mean, when somebody applies to when they actually get their final token?
Right. Well, that also depends heavily on volume,
Sure.
because there are manual processes required behind these, and we're working to increase automation. But if we have a reasonable load that matches the staffing that's applied, and we have no idea what you're going to submit, but assuming that within that, we're expecting to be able to turn everything around within hours, certainly same business day. That's our goal. We know that there are going to be certain localities, certain states, and certain municipalities and maybe tribes also, because we do cover tribal, where the information that's available, say online, is not sufficient. And so we'll actually have to reach out to those organizations to verify your registration. But assuming that you have a locality that supports good information flow online, there's no reason why you shouldn't have a turnaround within hours. Mail will be sent out from the time of verification to the time that is sent through the services is less than an hour. We have to run batches, but there'll be hourly batches. And so if you request a just USPS or email, you can expect to have that, you can expect it to be sent out within a day. Same with express mail, and you should expect to receive it the next day, as long as it's not at the end of the workday.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that does sound really, really good. I know a lot of our people in our community are really excited for a change like that, especially if we could also loop Campaign Verify in with that same process. That would make a lot of the registration when it comes to the verification and vetting a lot easier for everyone in the industry. So really happy to hear about that. Now, Stefan, we've been asked by a few political campaigns about a recent change where EIN is no longer required for registration for political campaigns specifically. As I understand it, this only applies to very small civic and municipal campaigns, and it has some other limitations around it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We're constantly getting edge cases, Dan, which is kind of the fun part about this, is that we're looking at solving some of the edge cases now. And one of them that came in, which is, I would say, maybe not as much in the edge cases as I thought it was, which is the registration of individuals who are running, say, for a school board or something like this, and they're running actually under their own steam. They're not using an EIN. They're actually just using their own social for any expenses or costs. And in that case, we had to figure out a way to actually make sure that those people could also register. And because they're running, essentially they're running as a sole proprietor, which in TCR's term is an individual or a business that basically runs messaging campaigns under their own social security number, not under an EIN. So there are restrictions, obviously, within the sole proprietor scenarios, which mean there would be a restriction in the volume that could be done either for throughput or daily volume on the respective carriers. So those are the specific things that happen there. But we can encourage people that if there is a very large school board race coming up and they know that the limitations in sole proprietor are not going to be able to manage the volume they're going to be doing, they need to get in touch with somebody like Peerly or Sinch, Bandwidth, Cineverse. Let us know as soon as possible, because we need to obviously collectively ensure that we bring the carriers into that space, let them know that there's something that is outside of the typical or what we've configured as typical, and we can start to make sure that we can cover that off and work with it, as opposed to just have somebody having a bad experience.
Good. I know that right now they would have a 1,000 message a day limit or something like that.
1,000 messages, 1,000 messages a day limit on T-Mobile. That's correct.
Yeah, okay, which of course can be quite limiting if it's a crunch time like election day or something. So
right,
good to keep in mind.
Right, it depends whether somebody's printing up badges and putting a few bill posts up, right, as opposed to doing a really big effective campaign. Because if you're running for school board in say the state of California, it can be many thousands of people that you're trying to get your messaging to.
We also got a lot of questions around MMS support with 10DLC, as well as MMS capacity for registered traffic. Do you have an update as to when the campaign registry will support registration for MMS?
Yes, I mean, what we're doing is we're going to be rolling out the support for MMS imminently, actually. And when I say support for MMS, a lot of people in the space, when you talk about the traditional long code space, the way it would work is that every account was, when people would be getting a long code account, they would be automatically enabled for both SMS and MMS anyway. So really the difference is from companies like Sinch and Bandwidth and Cineverse is what are they actually receiving, which would determine the billing that they gave on their messaging they would receive. Mm-hmm. Now, in some cases, in many cases, there would be a separate MMS termination endpoint that would have to be configured from those specific carriers, to those specific carriers from those aggregators, from those CSPs and DCAs. Now, with MMS on 10DLC, it has been very active on some carriers, less active on others, more reliable on some, not as reliable on others. And I'm not going to try and sort of speak to that directly. I don't know if Stephanie or Jonathan or Amanda would like to speak to where they feel the state of MMS is and how quickly the technical solutions would be resolved there. But from TCR's perspective, what we're going to be doing is that all the accounts will be automatically enabled for both SMS and MMS. There would be, as you change your account or you update your messaging campaign, you would be able to add the MMS sample message so that the carriers really do know what you should be sending, what it is you're thinking of sending from the sample message. The MMS sample message is a good way of being able to give that transparency to everybody in the chain, from your messaging partners all the way through up into the carriers. So we'll be collecting that, but we're not going to go back and say to people, okay, if you're running MMS, please put it in. It's great practice if you can do it, but we're not going to go back and demand it. The only time we're going to sort of say, change it, is when you may be making some changes in the campaign itself. Please update that information. Any new campaigns going forwards, you'll be able to have space to put both an MMS and an MMS, SMS and MMS sample message, so that you can clearly sort of denote when somebody's looking at the campaign and trying to determine whether this is accurate or not. They can look at both the SMS sample message and the MMS sample message and say, yes, this is following what we're being told we should have gotten in the first place.
Yeah, and I know we promote the best practice here to provide as many sample messages as possible, because your content of messaging is going to evolve over the course of a political campaign. You're going to start maybe with fundraising, but at the end of the day, you're going to be doing get out the vote kind of messaging. So provide us all those sample messaging. Let's be very transparent all the way up through the carrier chain, so everyone knows exactly what they're doing. So when they see those messages, it's not a surprise. They can go look and say, yep, that's exactly what they were planning to be doing. It's all good. Now, John, on the last webinar we did, there were a lot of questions around 501c3s and 501c4s that were recently formed and issues around their registration. I understand you have a bit of an update now on how the carriers are going to be handling this going forward.
Yes. So with regard to 501c3s, we certainly can accept any documentation that you have recently received that is not visible through the various IRS resources. What we found is that a lot of times you will get your determination letter before we're ever able to see it in IRS data. And so we're certainly, through the appeal process, we accept your version of the documentation for that. And the same goes really for any nonprofit. We'll certainly on appeal consider official documentation that you've received back from the IRS. What the big issue is that there are certain 501c3s and 501c4s in particular that that aren't required to file for a determination letter. And so then you don't have anything to send us. We are working on the 501c3 issue because you truly don't have to file anything. And so we're trying to figure out what we can do to make those determinations. For the most part, those tend to be small churches. And so that is something that we're working with the carriers, and Stefan in particular is working very closely with the carriers to try to figure that out. We're thinking along the lines of attestations and things like that. For 501c4s, we actually have come through that issue, because when they are going to operate without a determination letter, there is still an intention filing that they make with the IRS. And so I think it's like a form 8896 or something along those lines that they actually fill in an online form. And so we can accept a copy of that form where you've filed your intent to operate as a 501c4. What we like even more is we see that the IRS tends to give confirmation letters confirming that they have received your application, your intent to operate. But we'll accept either of those forms. Or if you have decided that you're going to get a determination letter, but you haven't received it yet, there is, you file that same form, plus the intent to operate plus an application for a determination letter. And if you can send that documentation to us, again, we'll consider that, and you'll be able to move forward before you actually receive a determination letter from the IRS.
Great.
Steph, anything to add to that?
That's great, John, and we appreciate that, Stefan, Dan. That's great news on vetting. I mean, that's a major announcement, I would say, for the industry. I can guarantee the audience will be happy to hear this. It sounds like it's going to save time and costs, and Aegis, I believe would be the perfect choice to bring on that initiative. So enhancing that role makes a lot of sense. So that's great news. I would actually like to just pass this over, if I could, to Amanda at Cineverse, just to give us an update on Cineverse's 10DLC rollout, and just to give us a general industry update, if that's okay. Amanda, if I could call on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoy being here with you all. And I'd say overall trend right now is we're seeing a lot of registrations come through, and a lot of people really jumping on the bandwagon of getting the traffic compliant. And I always go back to, the true goals, right, that we spoke about at the beginning of the reliability of the message, and preventing fraud. So what's been great is, we've been working closely with providers to truly figure out opt-ins, to take out the unwanted traffic, and to really work on like the good traffic and getting the throughput up on the traffic that's wanted. So just a lot of cooperation in the industry on that. One sort of update we've seen in the recent weeks that we wanted to share is that the carriers are increasingly looking at the 7726 data. So that's the data where the consumers opt out. So just a call out for people that, of course, the carriers want you to be registered. That kind of gets you like the most on the blacklist if it's unregistered and unwanted. But just pay attention to the fact that that's being scrutinized more heavily, and we're starting to send out a lot of notices to our customers that things are tightening up. And then I did want to comment quickly on the MMS piece, because I know we talked about it a little bit more. We are also seeing an increase in MMS, and we know that on the AT&T side that there's investment coming. Like the initial investment was more on SMS and getting the message class built out so that the messages could go up in velocity. But we're increasingly seeing that investment on the MMS side. So just say like stay tuned for more on that. And it's great to be able to see that varied consumer experience, to be able to receive messages both by SMS and then more interesting messages by MMS as well. So that would be the two comments that I would have is, thank you for registering. Thank you for getting into the detail of the opt-in and opt-outs. And yeah, I think we're seeing a lot more reliability in the messaging coming through.
Okay, great. Thank you very, very much, Amanda. If you have a question for Amanda for Cineverse, you can put it in the chat box below. We are going to move to Q&A shortly. I would like to pass this over to Jonathan from Sinch. Jonathan, thanks for being with us today. I would love to hear your perspective on 10DLC and how Sinch has approached the rollout, and anything else that you would like to add. We'd appreciate that, Jonathan.
Sure. So Sinch has been involved and invested in 10DLC since the early carrier trials. So it's been our blessing and headache from the beginning. And I'd say that we're finally seeing some real progress and support from the MNOs. I think everybody can finally take a little bit of a breath and note that 10DLC is working. Stefan's earlier question about MMS. I mean, what I would say is that early on when we looked to adaptation, we had a lot of tickets, a lot of problems. And most of these were solved with two real issues we saw, and that was sender and recipient based throttling that's in place. And that's the sender or 10-digit number allowed to transmit so many messages per second or per day, and then how many a typical user could receive them. The latter being a more rare situation. And we actually had to build APIs and solve this for our customers to throttle that. So these are kind of things that we had to jump through hoops to resort to. But the answer to that question is that I don't see those tickets anymore. I only see issues with campaigns that still don't have the right capacity in place, or we have to do modifications to the campaign type to match it up correctly. But most of that's been solved. So real good progress there. On our front ends, what we offer, we have three real ways that we offer 10DLC to customers. And I think most folks out there in this space do that. We have our strategic and enterprise clients where they come on board and they get kind of white glove treatment. These are the Fortune 10 companies that are out there. We'll build special things for them. We'll break rules and make things happen. But I think most people now today, competitors in the space and Sinch as well, have a dashboard experience where you can go in and you can pick numbers you want out of there. You can submit campaigns. It takes all those campaigns and files them on the back end through APIs. And this is registrations through net number, does the vetting through partners like Aegis and WMC, and then comes back with those scores, plugs it into the carrier networks, and you're ready to run in the same day. Now, you still got to, there's some exceptions if you want higher throughput or special vetting components that we're looking at, or if you misfile it, where we've got to go back and fix things. So it's real important that the folks that are in this space do educate themselves on what needs to happen. They need to understand timelines. They need to understand and right size the campaign for what they're filing to make sure it fits in all the buckets so they get the throughput they want. And then they need to ask questions about MMS and those kinds of things and filtering that still exists today. You could still, for example, have some issues with URL shorteners if you're not tying it to your domain. So some of these things kind of help solve the problems that become a ticket, by going through the right onboarding process with your customer to begin with. And then last, I think the other onboarding experience is account managers, where we still have folks that are dealing with accounts and they're in a hybrid situation, and we kind of manage a lot of that process for them as an existing account. So I think that the state of the union is that, 10DLC has come a long way, and it really is working. The carriers are still addressing some of the throughput limitations like MMS. There's still new use cases like UCAS and some of these particulars that operate in OTT or P2P space that we need to solve for. So we're working, as everybody is, to try to get these things resolved. And TCR is the driving force to help the carriers and with this. But 10DLC is really making some great progress. So I think as we look into political messaging space in the future, to be able to accommodate those volumes, I think it would be help all of us if we really understand how much we're going to see coming forward. And we know it's going to be big, but just how big? How many people were turned off from it? How many people saw the impacts working? Because we all know text messaging works, but I think that would help a lot of us kind of set the right size the what we're going to see next year, because the carriers always ask their direct connected aggregator partners for forecasts. So by better understanding that, if I had to ask for anything from the greater audience, it's that when we understand this in advance, we can help get the carrier networks built to be able to provide that kind of accommodation for us in the future.
Makes complete sense. Yeah, that's
we concur with that as well. Those forecasts are super helpful to us as all of us plan the capacity and get ready for the election season.
Yep.
Great. Okay, appreciate that, Jonathan. I'd like to pass this over to Stephanie at Bandwidth. Stephanie, thanks for joining the call today. Could you provide us with an update on how the 10DLC rollout is going with Bandwidth and anything interesting you might be hearing on the carrier level as well?
Sure. Thanks for having me back. So I think that I echo a lot of what Jonathan just said, in that Bandwidth has been engaged in 10DLC and a beta partner since the beginning. And we've seen a lot of progress. We've seen a lot of things change. And I think that overall, Bandwidth has seen a positive trend with our customers adopting 10DLC. I think that, encouraging our customers to register, to follow best practices, has really become more of a talk track for us, educating our customers, making sure they understand, what constitutes good traffic versus, unwanted traffic. I would also echo Amanda's sentiment that we're starting to have richer conversations about proactive planning, especially as it pertains to MMS capacity. We're starting to really get into a deep understanding of all of the volume that's forecasted, and then trying to make sure that we can ensure the highest deliverability for our customers. So I would say overall, we've learned a lot in the rollout of 10DLC. I would say that, there has been a lot of good educational opportunities for us to really understand what our customers are sending, and then really help them navigate all of the policies and requirements that are coming down from the carriers. So I would say overall very positive. And then your second question about how Bandwidth is working with our carriers and our downstream partners to ensure highest deliverability. We're having very close conversations. We're relying heavily on our partners, Cineverse, TCR, and our carrier relations to help us navigate how to ensure the highest deliverability for our customer messages. So I would say, close relationships, understanding traffic volumes early, having enough information to plan accordingly so that we can plan for how much capacity is needed. So that's really how Bandwidth has been experiencing 10DLC.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for that, Stephanie. And it sounds like a common narrative is really the ability to the importance of planning and really getting a sense of what's coming down from the customers. And as a as a campaign service provider, we definitely do that. We definitely work closely with our clients. We find that things change so fast within the political industry in terms of messaging, usually driven by the amount of volunteers, the amount of people that are being assigned to a campaign at any given day. So it can change. It can change quite quickly. But I think that there is some things that we can do on our end to do a better job forecasting that. And I know that there's probably a lot of service providers on the line that could probably put more emphasis on that in this cycle. So we appreciate that feedback as well. So we already have a lot of questions lined up. So I would like to move to our question and answer segment. We want to get through as many questions as we possibly can. We have a combination of a whole bunch of questions that's being submitted just in the last 20 minutes, as well as a lot of questions that's been emailed through to us. So we're going to just try to rifle them off and get through as many as possible. If there's something you guys want to jump in on, let me know. And otherwise, I'll try my best to assign them and just try to keep your messages as short and succinct as possible so we can get through all of them. Right now, we're sitting at probably about 40 to 50 questions. I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but possibly. We're also going to make sure we try not to duplicate them. So we're trying to get a good, good mix of questions in. So I'd like to introduce our question moderator, Eric, and Eric can start our questions.
We have our first question that's come in from Rob, who asks, what are the consequences for not registering with 10DLC?
Okay, good question. Maybe we can start this question off and send this to Stefan at the Campaign Registry.
Consequences for not registering means that, two things. One, the messaging partner you're working with may not accept unregistered traffic. That's one thing to take into account. Second thing is that if your messaging partner does accept unregistered traffic, then ergo that traffic is running unregistered. There are increased fees, and you will be hitting the spam filters and blocks that the carriers have put in place on that unregistered traffic path.
Great, thank you. Back to you, Eric.
Up next, we have an anonymous question has come in, and the question is, many times C3s, C4s, and packs are spun up quickly during the course of campaigns. How can we get successfully vetted with a positive score for groups that don't have a long track record?
John, would you be able to weigh in on this?
Sure. We, by carrier requirements, we do need to see some documentation that gives us an assurance that you are operating as the appropriate kind of organization. And so that's why we've been working with the carriers to expand what is acceptable. There are sensitivities. For example, if you're spinning up as a 501c3, there are tax implications. And so we're working on ways that we can appropriately flag them so that when the carriers are essentially donating the messaging, that they can account for that properly and legally. So we're working on additional documentation. For example, for the C4s, the forms 8976 and 1024A are the critical ones that the carriers are now allowing us to accept to verify you. And as I said before, we're working on what we can do to improve our ability to accept 501c3s that are spinning up quickly.
Okay, great, thank you. And back to you, Eric.
Next, a question has come in from Lindsay, who asks, I am trying to register on behalf of my client, but there is no place for my email to be used, so I have to rely on my client to forward any email pertaining to the registry. Is there a way to best complete this on behalf of my client without getting them involved?
Thanks for that question, Lindsay. You know what? That's not the first time we've got that question. We got that question a couple of times in the last session we did a month ago. Who would be best to take this? Maybe Stefan?
So I'm just thinking about this. The registry obviously is there to register campaign service providers. So the CSPs that are operating for and on behalf of the brands. So they would normally be responsible for gathering the information and entering it in there. In TCR, there is a space for putting an email address. So I'm a little confused by the question, actually, because we do collect email addresses and we do use that as part of determination to clarify the brand. So the brands.
Yeah,
I mean,
Stefan,
yeah,
I think it might be related directly to political vetting. That's what I think the gist of the question is, and they're hoping, and a lot of kind of our political consultants are hoping that they can interject themselves in the process and manage that registration. But of course, the PIN code gets emailed to some other entity. They're hoping that they can intercept that PIN code.
Yeah,
I understand why, but
yeah, that's a bit of a
that cannot happen. That violates the integrity of political verification.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys, for weighing in on that. Eric, back to you.
We have another question that's come in from an attendee, and the question is, how are brand registration TCR scores determined? And if a nonprofit gets a low score, is there any way to find out why? And what are the consequences of getting a low score?
Okay, great. Stefan, could we start with you on this question?
So when you're registering a nonprofit, then it really sort of falls into a couple of different entity types, because depending on the election campaign that you're running, if you're running a C4, 5, or 6, then the only time that you're needing to get an extended vetting score is if the basic throughput given on one particular carrier, which at this point would be T-Mobile, does not meet the requirements for your messaging profile. So in other words, if the 2,000 messages a day, which is the basic that T-Mobile gives, would not meet your messaging profile, then you would need to apply for extended vetting. So but the first step of all of this is to verify that you are indeed a C status organization. If you're doing 527, if you're a 527 organization, then you would be, in TCR, Aegis would be checking whether you have a C status. If you don't, then the next thing we're checking is if you have a vetting token. If you have a vetting token, and that is a confirmation that you're running an election campaign, then you would be getting, you wouldn't need to do any more throughput checks, because you get the maximum throughput on T-Mobile, which is unlimited messaging. And then you would get the highest throughput on AT&T, which currently is at 4,500 TPM. So it's only really in the C3, 4, 5, 6 that really we're talking about on one particular carrier having to go for extended vetting.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that answers it. Thank you very much. Eric, over to you.
Up next, we have a question from Rob, who asks, what are the requirements and costs to be registered with 10DLC?
Okay, Dan, would you be able to start with this?
Yeah, sure. So the requirements are simple. We just collect some base level information about the organization. The one that causes a little bit of pain sometimes is the EIN. They're easy to obtain if your organization doesn't have one. It's a one form on the IRS site, and you get it a couple minutes later. And in terms of costs associated with the 10DLC registration process, right now, Purely is covering those costs. There are a variety of different costs under the hood that exist when it comes to registering, vetting, branding, all that kind of stuff. We're simplifying that. We're covering that directly for our clients at the moment.
Yeah, I know there's other CSPs doing the same thing. And I mean, I think that that's helpful, especially just kind of as this is a bit of a transitionary year. Let's go to the next question, Eric.
Next, we have a question again from an attendee who asks, are there registration options for pollsters and consultants who have many different campaigns under their management, or must each campaign be registered individually?
It's a good question. Dan, and then maybe we can have John weigh in.
Yeah, sure. So this is definitely something that we get asked a lot, and it's a good question, and it's a little bit tough one to wrap your head around at first, but just trying to look at it at the simplest approach. The carriers want to know who is sending every single message. So you may be a campaign service provider, and I mean that in the political sense, not in the carrier sense, where you're providing texting services to political campaigns. You're working with 5 or 6 of them. You need to have each one of those registered, because they're the ones that are on the brand name of that campaign. They're the ones that are representing as sending. That's a little bit different in the polling space, and we can talk about that differently, because usually when you're doing a poll, you're doing it under your own brand, and then that would be the brand that is registered. But if you're working with 5 or 6 political campaigns, each one needs to be registered. And Peerly has a system that's built right in that lets you manage multiple registrations under a single account, and we take care of all of that. So it's quite easy to do.
Okay, great. I think that actually probably answers that. Eric, we have our next question.
We have another question from an attendee who asks, what are the pros and cons of using 10DLC for political traffic versus toll-free?
Hey, Amanda, would you be able to speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone, a lot of these numbers were kind of interchangeable if it's toll free or a regular 10-digit long code. I mean, these days we see both. I would say that everything's moving anyway towards the same price point. So price wise, there's not a big difference. But if you go through the registration process and go through the steps of vetting and get the highest message class and highest score, I mean, you're going to get more throughput. So, I mean, I think that depends on the volume of what you're trying to send. But if you're looking for the highest capacity and the most reliability, I'd say the 10DLC registration process is the most effective.
Okay, great. Anyone else want to weigh in on toll-free versus 10DLC?
One thing that I always go back to is, a lot of what we do with Peerly is these one-on-one conversations and personal touch points. While toll-free, I think, has absolutely legitimate applications in the political space, it's more in the bulk side of things. It's a little less personal, where you, with a 10DLC and that local number, you get a much better connection with the voter. It looks like it's a volunteer around the corner messaging. So,
okay, great. Thank you very much, guys, for that question. Eric, back to you.
Up next, we have a question from Amberly. Amberly asks, currently, when you apply for Aegis vetting for a brand that already has a campaign registered, it does not automatically update the carrier terms with that campaign. You must submit a campaign registry ticket, which takes anywhere from an hour to a week to receive a response for. Are there any plans for automating this?
John, if you could start with
that. I can answer.
Okay,
I can answer that.
Stefan, perfect.
The answer is yes.
Great.
We are.
Okay, that's great. Eric, back to you.
Up next, we have a question, and it's from an attendant who asks the 1,000 message per day limit with T-Mobile. Can that be explained again, please? What is it for? Which types of brands, campaigns, etc.?
Jonathan, would you be able to start with that? Just explain kind of the T-Mobile 1,000 message a day limit. That's what they were asking about. Which type of brand?
The daily buckets, that's like the entry level place. So you can actually have unlimited throughput available if you go through the special business review. And this really requires, just like what it sounds like, it's for the carriers to be looking at the campaign to see what's available there. So there are 3 different classifications for T-Mobile: low, medium, high. And it really depends if you're testing the service and you're coming in through an ASP that's got test functionality enabled, so true test number functionality, or if you're going all the way through the more painful process of special business review, which is going to be very similar timeline wise and in depth of questions as a short code campaign to get that high throughput. Because what they're trying to do is the MNOs are trying to right size this. You're not limited by using a 10-digit sender, unlike a short code that doesn't support voice. But to do that, they really want to look at this, because you're taking the ability to terminate a lot of messages into their network to their subscribers, and they really care most about protecting their subscriber experience. So I think that TCR's got this outlined. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stefan, all the different throughput mechanisms that are tied. There's what you hear about T-Mobile, there's about 10 more on AT&T that break down by campaign type. So you really need to look at how the largest carriers approach this, and really it's T-Mobile and AT&T with the most unique ways of managing campaign type and registrations by throughput. But I would suffice it to say you've got 3 tiers in T-Mobile, with a possible for unlimited if you do go through the long process of SBR and getting everything together.
Okay.
Just to add to that, there's also, of course, the political use case, which is presently uncapped.
Right.
And a lot of course, the people in the Peerly space would qualify that because they're going to go through the campaign verify vetting process. So,
right. So all the folks like Peerly, the ASPs picking up these campaigns, we're there to help you support in the Q&A process to get this stuff together, and then set precedent for how long it does take to get these approved and out the door.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jonathan and Dan there. Eric, back to you.
Next, we have another question. This one is from Leslie, who asks, is MMS not supported by 10DLC? As a market research firm, we are polling on ballots that will be voted on in November. Do we need to tell our clients MMS is not registered traffic? If we do send MMS traffic, is that open to fines?
Okay, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier on in the call. I think Stefan was mentioning it. Maybe I'll start back with Stefan on this.
Yeah, I mean, MMS is definitely available on 10DLC. It's there are just very specifically with AT&T, they are just really rolling. I think Amanda, you had mentioned this as well. They are really just improving their infrastructure within within the MMS part of AT&T to give it a little bit more robustness, really be able to deliver to the people messaging and using MMS on 10DLC the end results that they really want. And so that's it. It works. You can terminate messages on MMS on 10DLC absolutely fine on all of the carriers' networks. It's just that AT&T realized they just need to put a little bit more robustness into their technical implementation of MMS on 10DLC versus MMS on shortcode, which has been running for forever and a day. So in 10DLC, they just needed to tweak a few things, which is what they've been doing.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that question. And back to you, Eric.
Next, we have a question from Jen, who asks, we are requiring TCR/10DLC registration for our users. However, I'm curious to learn more about how fines will be handled, how much, by whom, and how will they come through?
Great. Could we start with Amanda talking about this?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. Right now we've been starting to see the beginning of non-compliance coming through, like 7226, and meaning the consumer spam, and then the operators, MNOs, actually asking for RCAs. So that's coming. We're not yet getting actual fines down the path, but in our announcements, and we make them usually monthly, kind of similar to the others, but we have the prices defined. So depending on if it's a content violation, it's $10,000. That's like if you're using cannabis or violating code of conduct. And then you have other different kinds of non-compliance fees, but the carriers reserve the right to charge these non-compliance fees, at the time deemed appropriate. But I think as everybody is registering and they see progress and everyone trying to do the right thing, we haven't yet seen those fines be acted upon. But I don't know, Jonathan, if you see things differently, but right now, we haven't seen rubber stamp fines being sent across.
I would just echo that it's in our agreements, so they have the ability to charge these, and they're there really to impose the folks that blatantly violate the rules there. They're going to collect these from their direct connected partners, and we of course are going to chase the folks that do this intentionally. That's always going to be the case. I mean, if someone's looking to send illicit material to somebody else or to violate those rules. That's where the carriers are looking to make amends. So they do have a big stick. I mean, that's how they limit their ability and access into their network. But I think it's really there to keep everybody in the straight and narrow.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for that question. Eric, can we have our next question?
We have a question now from Jason, who asks, is it important for the shortened URL domains in the text message to match the domain that your campaign is registered under?
Dan, would you like to start with this?
Yeah, sure. So, from a purely best practice point of view, we're a hard yes on this. We feel that it's very important that if you're representing a shortened domain inside a shortened URL, that it's similar, if not very close to the actual domain that it's going to. And if you're having any sort of domain that goes from something that sounds like it's your organization to something else, we feel that's bad. I would like to get maybe Stephanie or John or Amanda to weigh in on any experience on that. I know that from our point of view, we say that that's a hard no. What about you guys? Have you had any experience on that?
Yeah, I would agree that we are really pushing our customers for that domain name to match the URL shortener link in the message. Yeah. So that's really the direction we're providing our customers.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Similarly, I would say, like, don't use Bitly. You're going to be opening tickets because your messages are not going to be coming through. But yeah, use your domain and at least evolve towards that if you don't already have that in place.
I think that's good advice. Eric, can we have our next question?
The next question is from an attendee who asks, what is the score for? What is the score for, and what does it do?
Great. Score. So that would be John. Just asking generally, what's the score for?
What is the score for?
What's the score for, and what does it do? So I'm assuming, what is the scoring process for, and what would happen if you had a low score versus?
Well, okay, so we have configurations set up depending upon the type of organization that you are. So we get all the information presented to us by TCR, and we actually have algorithms that we've worked up that are configurable to meet the carrier needs. And so we've actually reviewed all of the parameters that go into it, and it's hundreds to thousands based upon what we get back. So we're taking a look at legal returns from a lot of different sources. We're taking a look at regulatory returns. We're taking a look at business returns. And we're going across probably 24 sources, depending upon the type of organization you are, seeing what comes back. And then for each of the cases that comes back, there are points associated with the various findings. And it's all done very algorithmically. We've opened that up completely to the carriers and had them weigh in on how they want the organizations evaluated. And then we put those onto a common scale that bridges across AT&T and T-Mobile throughput requirements, and that's how everything is automatically determined. In the event that there are appeals or other levels of vetting that may be available to you, we take a look. We actually do manual investigations and look to see if there are mitigating factors, if there's additional information available, or if there are some additional sources that maybe aren't available automatically that give us indications, that benefit you, or keep in mind that we may find things that lower your score. But in general, the more we know about you, the better your score is going to be. So the more we're able to find, then there are adjustments.
Great, thank you very much, John. Eric, back to you.
Up next, we have a question from an attendee who asks two questions. When does TCR anticipate providing improved CNP campaign search capabilities in the portal? And when does TCR plan to provide the ability to migrate campaigns, i.e. change connectivity partners in the chain?
Okay, Stefan, would you like to start with that?
Yes, it is on our roadmap. We recognize that the enhanced information for CNPs is going to be coming. The migration is a slightly more complex scenario where somebody is moving from a DCA to a DCA. It is a little bit more straightforward, but where someone's in the middle of the chain, then there can be all kinds of implications where the person you're moving to or you're migrating to has a different DCA, and there are a lot more complicated elements in this. And so we are in the middle of discussions and opening discussions with the DCAs about how much we need to be able to automate and how much is actually going to be a little bit of a manual process because of the complexities around it. So the first part, yes, that's on our roadmap and it should be coming fairly quickly. And the second half is that we're in the middle of the investigation on complex migrations where people are in the middle of a CNP chain.
Okay, great, thank you. And we are running a little bit late. We're going to take a few more questions. We still have a lot of participants on the line, still a lot of questions in the queue. So if you guys are okay, we'll take a couple of more. Eric, back to you.
Up next, we have an attendee who asks, what is the benefit of vetting a small user of under 2K messages a day versus not vetting and grading them?
Stefan, would you be able to answer that for us?
So if I understand the question, this was if they've got a small user sending a small amount of messages, you wouldn't really need to go and get vetting. Vetting really just takes you out of the low tiers, or is looking to take you out of the low tiers of throughput. So if you're fine where you are, then you do the basic verification. And once you've paid for that basic verification, you don't need to do anything else. If you do need more throughput, that's when you would need to pay. So you have to understanding your customer's needs, where they are now and where they could be growing to is really important.
Great. Thank you, Stefan. Eric, back to you.
We have a question that has come in from Kelly, and Kelly asks, we use Peerly's SMS fonts. Can we keep doing that after 10DLC registration?
Dan, I'll pass that to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The font system that's built into Peerly is fully compatible with 10DLC. You can continue to use it. There's no worries there.
Okay, great. Next question, Eric.
Up next, we have a question from Rob who asks, is 10DLC strictly intended for use in the political promotion space, or will it extend into other markets that may be using mass texting campaigns? Can it stop text spam from scammers, for example?
Okay, maybe we could pass this over to Jonathan.
What was the question about? I didn't quite get
no problem.
Context.
Eric, do you have the question handy?
I do, just one second. It's Rob, and Rob is asking, is 10DLC strictly intended for use in political promotion space, or will it extend into other markets that may be using mass texting campaigns? And can it stop text spam from spammers, for example?
It's a good question from Rob. So it is absolutely used across all the products and services. Everything that's on 10-digit senders before now has to be registered, really, essentially. I mean, if you don't, you risk the problems that Stefan noted about throughput. So our clients in this are food delivery services, ride sharing and hailing. It's the biggest of the big senders that everybody sees for interactions with 10-digit senders today. Those folks are all registered or very close to finalizing the process of being registered. So 10DLC applies to all those use cases for 10-digit. Now, will it fix or address the problems of spam? That's something that yes, the intention is for that to happen, and I believe it has made some pretty big impacts. However, I still get a lot of spam calls and texts. I'm sure everybody does here today. So the difference is that now they've got mechanisms in place, really mandated from the FCC down to the carriers to solve both calling and text spam, and the mechanisms to enforce it. So it's in the agreements to their direct connected partners through fines, and all the aggregators in this space and CSPs know that it impacts their business if they don't have ways to address spam. So I think the thing that we all have to consider here is that it's this ecosystem is a place where when people have problems with spam as a subscriber, and everybody can relate to this, you stop answering your calls. So until the carrier started mandating or really implementing the mechanisms like spam likely or that equivalent into their networks, and having things like 7726, as well as carrier specific or MNO specific tools to be able to report spam in their applications, and then control that with the account holder being able to block that. If we don't solve this problem, the operators are going to solve it for us, which means it's really hard for us to provide the kinds of services that typically become more spammy. And everybody's seen this stuff. The extended car warranty is the biggest meme out there. Everyone knows about. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I think these kind of things really prevent people from opening these messages. And the goal of SMS is to increase the open rate and to get that timely delivery to your consumer. So I think we have to solve it. We all have to work to better this, but we have to realize that it's really the bad actors that have spoiled this for us. So if we can fix those problems and still allow political messaging, all of these use cases that are there that are wanted, consumer consent is there. It's a huge business for all of us. So it's up to us to solve, fix, and to expand upon.
Great, thank you. Eric, do we have another question?
We do. Carl asks, as a polling company, we often do work on behalf of our customers. Do those customers need to register, or just us?
Dan, can I pass that to you?
Yeah, sure. This is a great question. Like it's already come up once, and it's important that we hammer this home. So if you are doing a polling project and you're using your own brand name to conduct that polling project, XYZ polling company, then you are the registrant. You have to register. You have to get vetted. If it's your campaigns that are, their names are in there, so it's on behalf of a candidate or something like that, or it's the campaign messaging their volunteers, then they have to register. It's whatever brand is actively doing the communication.
Great. I think we have time for another question. Eric, do we have another question?
We have another question from Mary, who asks, where do the registration fees go?
Okay, great. Stephanie, could you answer that for us?
Sure. So the registration fees that a customer is paying for each campaign, those go into the management. So are you speaking about, I guess I need a little bit more clarification. Are you talking about the registration fees that are charged by TCR?
Yes, I think it's the TCR registration fees I think they're referring to.
And is the question around how are they invoiced or passed along?
Where does the end, I think that the question was where does the end money end up? Is it something that ends up with the final MNOs, or is it something that ends up with the DCAs or the campaign registry? I think they're just looking for clarification.
Okay, so those fees are charged to the CSPs or DCAs through TCR. We pay them on behalf of our customers, and I think that Bandwidth specifically passes those fees on to our customers. So where do they end up? I think that it's kind of the domino effect, right? The customer pays us, we pay TCR, TCR probably pays the carriers. Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Actually, so to put the whole product in place costs a lot of money. And we have ongoing data services that we have to pay for, and also the InfoSec to keep all of the information secure. So it's the SOX audits, the ISO certifications that we have to maintain as well. So a lot of it is going into the maintenance and the overhead of running the registry. So the campaign registration fees, the monthly campaign registration fees, go to really kind of covering the costs of running the registry.
Okay, great, thank you very much. And I think just like that, we are kind of getting we're getting a little bit over our initial hour, and we still have a lot of questions. Before wrapping up, just real quick to everybody, following up to Dan's first thing he mentioned, where he said there had been, some some rumors or some people saying in the industry, oh, don't get registered, wait. One of the reasons why we have this call right now is just to really provide this clarification. Amanda from Cineverse is here. Stephanie from Bandwidth is here. Jonathan from Sinch is here. You have Stefan from the Campaign Registry and John from Aegis, Dan. Everybody is saying the exact same thing. As you can see, you're not going to get, you're not going to be able to go higher than this group in terms of expertise. They're saying make sure you get registered. So if you're holding off, it is important. You can reach out to any one of us if you have any questions that way. I like the fact that everybody really has come together in terms of the DCAs and the registry and the CSPs over those last couple of months and really kind of work for that common goal of promoting and working through this process with everybody. And we have a little ways to go. And I think that if the kind of community sticks together and we all work hard over the next month or two, we can make sure that everybody's registered going into the really busy kind of, fall political cycle. So besides that, we are going to wrap up. I have to say a huge thank you to Stephanie and to Stefan and Jonathan, to John Tooley and Amanda from Cineverse. You guys are amazing. Dan, of course. We really appreciate your time. We know how busy you guys are, but the fact that you would be able to spend this time with the political community, we really do appreciate it. It's very, very helpful. We are holding our next 10DLC industry follow-up on May 12th. So that's 6 weeks from now. And our entire panel is invited back. So we hopefully will have you guys come back. And for all of the individuals that participated today, you will receive an automatic invitation. So you don't need to re-register. You'll get a Zoom invite and just add it to your calendar. Besides that, if you have any other questions or if we were unable to get to you today, when this is done, you'll be redirected to our calendar page. Just book a call and one of us will jump on the call. We'll talk through your questions. If we don't know the answer, then we'll just send an email over to one of our panelists and we'll get you that answer. So everyone's pretty committed to trying to set the record straight out there. So we appreciate it. Once again, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you to our panelists. Have a wonderful afternoon. Take care. Goodbye.